this video, I'm going to be talking about rule systems for language, and they are going to include phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics, and pragmatics. And then in class, we'll talk about the ages at which you develop the ability to follow these different rule systems. But at this point, you just need the definitions in your book or in your notes. So phonology is the sound system of language. What this means is you have phonemes, and then we'll get into morphemes with morphology. But a phoneme is the smallest unit of sound in a language. So examples of phonemes would be ba, ma, da, those sorts of things. When babies babble, they babble with phonemes. And you have certain phonemes in each language, and as you'll see in the assignment for this chapter, you lose the ability to recognize phonemes that are not in your native language, and it is the ability to recognize and produce these phonemes that causes us to have accents when we speak our language or other languages. That's all connected to the phonemes phonology. For morphology, this is the word formation based on meaning. And so just like phonemes go with phonology, these have morphemes. And a morpheme is the smallest unit of sound which carries meaning in a language. So an example of a morpheme would be mama, because that makes sense, that's something, or cat would be a morpheme. You can't really get smaller than that and still have it be a word that makes sense. So these are the smallest words you can have, the smallest unit of sound that has meaning, like a word. Syntax is the way words are combined for acceptable phrases and sentences. So if you have inappropriate syntax, that would mean that the words are in the wrong order, basically. This has to be in the correct order for it to have appropriate syntax. It's the way the words are combined. So I go to the house has appropriate syntax. House to I go, not quite. It doesn't make as much sense because the word order is a little wonky. So word order matters. It also matters the way words are combined to make sense, not just for the word itself. The basic word is morphology, but how you combine them is semantics. So semantics is the meaning of words and sentences. So you could have a sentence with appropriate syntax, but if it's inappropriate semantics, it's also not going to be correct. For example, you can't say the ball draws beautifully because balls can't draw. That would be inappropriate semantics. So does it make sense? Are the words, is the meaning correct? Are the sentences correct for meaning? Semantics, are they in the right order? Syntax. Specific sounds, morphology, and phonology. And then finally, you have pragmatics. Pragmatics are the use of appropriate conversation and knowledge underlying the use of language in context. So there's a couple of different ways this works, and we'll talk about the ages again that these develop in class. But this would involve everything from the fact that you don't curse in our classroom because that is not appropriate conversation for the class. You do not do that. This would be If you're speaking to a 2-year-old, you're going to use much simpler language than if you're speaking to a peer, because the 2-year-old won't be able to understand all the words you would use if you're speaking to another adult. That would also fall under pragmatics. So again, phonology, basic sound with meaning, connects with morphology. Syntax is the order of things. Semantics is the meaning. And pragmatics is the appropriate use. So these are all things that develop. Again, we'll talk about the specific ages in class. And then one more thing connected to language development that I'll throw in this video has to do with vocalizations and the age at which these appear. So this is not connected to the development of these. We'll go over that in class, but one thing you do see early on is vocalizations. The first vocalizations you see would be crying. Cries are vocalizations. They are trying to get their point across. They're trying to communicate with newborn cries. After that, you can get cooing. Cooing tends to appear about 2 months old. After cooing comes babbling. Babbling comes about 6 months. And there's different forms of babbling that we'll talk about in class, canonical or variegated. And if you have a deaf child, they will actually babble with their hands. So even deaf children who are going to use sign language still do babbling, even if it's not verbal. And going along with that, even children who have hearing will use gestures to try to get their point across, anywhere from 8 to 12 months. In class, we'll talk about babies using sign language, but even things like pointing out, trying to grab something, they're trying to communicate with you through their gestures, and that can pop up by 8 to 12 months. So within the first year of life, you're going to see all of these. We'll talk about first words, combinations of words in class, but this is the general order for vocalizations in the first year.